There's a kind of death that doesn't come with coffins. It comes with quiet. It comes when your voice breaks. Not because you shouted too loud, but because no one cared to listen. You learn early that silence has its own cemetery. A place where every unspoken truth, every choked word, every swallowed scream lies buried beneath the soil of restraint. I've walked that graveyard. I've seen the tombstones, each one carved with something I once wanted to say. There was a time I spoke softly, and they mistook it for weakness. They thought my calm was surrender, my patience, submission, my quiet emptiness. But they never understood. There's a difference between staying silent because you're afraid and staying silent because you've already seen too much. Silence can be peace, but sometimes it's pain dressed as peace. You sit in the dark, not because it comforts you, but because you're tired of being the light no one sees. You hold your words back, not because you've got nothing to say, but because you know they'll only twist them into something ugly. I learned that peace and pain look the same from the outside. You could be meditating, or you could be mourning, and no one can tell the difference. They say silence is golden, but that's a lie told by those who've never had to swallow their screams. Silence isn't gold, it's iron, cold, heavy, relentless. You carry it like chains around your throat. Every time I bit my tongue, every time I walked away, every time I pretended it didn't hurt, another shackle was forged, and I wore them with a forced smile. Because that's what the world teaches you. Be silent, be polite, be small. Don't make noise. Don't disturb the peace, even when that peace is killing you slowly. But there comes a moment when silence stops being surrendered, and starts becoming sharpening. It doesn't break you anymore. It builds you. Every word you didn't say becomes a blade being tempered in the fire of restraint. Every time you stayed quiet, you were listening to something deeper. The sound of your own becoming. They didn't hear the thunder forming inside me, because thunder doesn't announce itself. It builds in secret, and when it finally speaks, the world remembers. There's power in being unheard. There's danger in being misunderstood. And there's a transformation in being ignored long enough to stop caring. Because silence, it isn't absence, it's preparation. When the world turns its back, when every echo fades, when the last voice that used to believe in you goes quiet, you start hearing something else. Your own voice, buried beneath the rubble. A whisper at first, then a heartbeat, then a drum. That's when you realize silence doesn't mean the end, it's the forge. There was a night I stopped trying to explain myself, stopped begging to be understood, stopped screaming into deaf rooms. I sat there in the stillness, and I heard it, that low hum beneath my ribs. The storm wasn't gone, it was waiting. It was learning patience. It was learning precision. They thought they silenced me, but all they did was give me time to sharpen every word into a weapon, to turn my breath into thunder, my heartbeat into war drums. Now I understand. Silence isn't weakness. It's the cocoon where the monster learns to fly. They'll never know what it costs to stay quiet in a world that feeds on noise. They'll never know what it feels like to bury every scream under a calm face. But I know, and I'll never apologize for what it turned me into, because I found something sacred in that stillness. A kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't seek, doesn't beg. It just waits. And when it finally moves, it doesn't whisper. It roars. They thought I was gone. That silence meant defeat, but they forgot. Storms don't speak until it's time to destroy. My silence was never weakness. It was the sound of a storm loading. Every second I said nothing, I was rebuilding something no one could destroy. So now, when I speak, I don't raise my voice. I raise the ground beneath their feet. I buried my words in silence, and they rose again as fire. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unseen. You can stand in a crowded room, smiling, breathing, existing, and still feel like a ghost walking through the living. People hear you, but they don't listen. They look, but they don't see. You become background noise in your own story. That's the curse of the quiet ones. The world doesn't notice until you've burned everything down. There were days I spoke and no one flinched. Days my pain echoed off walls that never cared to answer back. Days I wondered if silence was my destiny or my punishment. And in that quiet, something inside me started to change. You begin to realize that being invisible isn't a tragedy. It's training. It's the universe stripping you of audience so you can finally hear your own truth. At first, the silence feels like suffocation. You reach out, and nothing reaches back. You scream, and your voice drowns in the void. You start thinking maybe they were right, maybe you're too much, or not enough. But invisibility is deceptive. It's not the absence of light, it's the birthplace of it. Because when no one sees you, you stop performing. You start becoming. You stop trying to fit into the noise. And you start forging your own frequency. The world loves to misunderstand silence. They see a man who doesn't speak much, and they call him broken. They see eyes that don't react, and they call them cold. But they never ask why. Maybe I stopped talking because every conversation felt hollow. Maybe I stopped reacting because I've seen too much to flinch. Maybe I became quiet because I was studying the noise. Every whisper, every betrayal, every fake laugh behind my back, every smile that hit a knife. I memorized them all in silence. And when you've been invisible long enough, you start to see through people who still think they're hiding. There's pain in being ignored, yes, but there's also power, because invisibility removes illusion. It shows you the truth. You start to see who claps when you fall. You start to see who only loved you when you were useful. You start to see who speaks peace, but breathes envy. And once you see all that, silence becomes addictive. You stop needing validation. You stop begging to be understood. You stop chasing noise and start walking with purpose. I remember sitting alone one night and realizing that no one was coming to save me. No one was going to hand me the closure I deserved. No one was going to explain why they left or why they broke what they promised to protect. And for the first time, that truth didn't hurt. It freed me. Because silence, when accepted, becomes armor. You start to wear it like a crown made of shadows. And the same invisibility that once made you suffer starts to make you untouchable. They didn't hear me because I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to the future. The one where my voice no longer shakes. The one where I don't need to scream to be felt. The one where my silence has more gravity than their noise ever could. That's the thing about quiet people. They don't vanish. They evolve. And by the time the world remembers their name, it's already too late. They called me quiet. They called me distant. They called me strange. I call it discipline. I call it clarity. I call it freedom. Because when you're invisible, you learn something the loud ones never do. You don't need to be seen to exist. You don't need to be heard to matter. You don't need a stage to become legendary. I used to crave being understood. Now I crave peace. I used to chase recognition. Now I chase purpose. And the silence that once haunted me now guards me. Because not every voice is meant for the crowd. Some are meant for the storm. Some are meant for the mirror. Some are meant to awaken something ancient. Something only the broken can hear. So when people say I disappeared, they're wrong. I didn't disappear. I withdrew to rebuild, to remember, to prepare. They'll call it arrogance when I finally speak again. They'll call it ego when I walk differently. But what they'll never understand is that silence made me see the truth, and the truth made me unstoppable. There's a reason the gods speak in thunder only after long silences. There's a reason warriors meditate before they go to war, and there's a reason I've been quiet for so long. Because invisibility isn't my curse, it's my cocoon. When I emerge, the same mouths that called me nothing will whisper my name like a prayer. They called me silent, but silence was only the sound of my becoming. There's a moment you'll never forget. Not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. The silence that follows betrayal is the loudest sound a soul can hear. It's the echo of something breaking, not outside you, but within. I remember the day they turned away. No words, no warning. Just eyes that used to hold warmth, now looking through me as if I was already gone. They didn't have to stab me. They just stopped caring, and that was enough to make the blade real. They say betrayal comes once. No, it comes in layers. Every time you replay it, every time you ask yourself why, every time you look in the mirror and see the ghost of who you were before, that's another cut. And the cruelest part? It's never your enemies who do it. It's the ones who swore they never would. I gave them my loyalty. They gave me lessons. I gave them truth. They gave me silence. I gave them my voice, and they used it to drown me. There's a strange beauty in betrayal, because it doesn't just hurt you, it reveals you. It shows you what you were made of and who you were never meant to keep. The day they left, I didn't shatter all at once. I crumbled in slow motion, piece by piece, memory by memory, until there was nothing left but quiet. That's the cruel gift of betrayal. It kills you softly, so you have time to feel every fracture. For a long time, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I cared too much. Maybe I was too loyal in a world that worships convenience. But the truth hit harder than the pain. Some people never betray you. They just reveal what they were from the beginning. I used to think loyalty meant standing beside someone no matter what. Now I know it means standing beside yourself, even when everyone else walks away. The first night after they left, I sat in silence. Not the kind that heals, but the kind that hunts. Every breath felt heavy. Every heartbeat sounded like an accusation. The air around me didn't feel real. You start to wonder if maybe you deserved it. Maybe the problem was you. But pain has a way of burning illusions. And once the fire dies, you see what was always true. You were never the problem. You were the lesson they couldn't handle. I realized something that night. Betrayal doesn't just break you, it builds you. It strips away everything fake, everything fragile, everything untested, until all that's left is steel. They thought they broke me, but they only burned away my softness. What survived wasn't the man they betrayed. It was something else, something sharper, something quieter, something that no longer bleeds for undeserving hands. There's a version of me that died when they left, and I grieved him for a while, but now I see he had to die, because that version was built on hope. And hope is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong people. I don't hate them anymore. Hate still requires energy, and I owe them nothing. Instead, I thank them, because in betraying me, they forced me into solitude, and solitude birthed clarity. When they left, I learned the most important truth of all. No one is coming to save you. Not your friends, not your family, not the ones who promised they'd never leave. No one. And that realization is both devastating and divine. Because the moment you stop waiting for rescue, you start becoming your own savior. You stop pleading and start planning. You stop crying and start calculating. You stop dying and start becoming. I used to think silence was the end of the story, Now I see it was the beginning of evolution. When they turned away, they freed me from their noise. And in that emptiness, I heard something new. A hum. Low, steady, unshakable. The sound of my own rebirth. They thought I'd bleed out in the dark. But I learned to breathe there. I learned that when no one believes in you, you become something no one understands. A man forged by silence, refined by pain, driven by ghosts, and destined to rise. I don't want revenge. Revenge keeps you chained to the past. What I want is resurrection. A version of me so powerful they won't recognize the ashes they left behind. Betrayal didn't end me. It introduced me to me. And the man I became doesn't whisper. He doesn't beg. He doesn't break. He builds. He waits. He returns. So to those who left, those who lied, those who turned their backs while pretending to care, I don't curse you. I thank you. You taught me silence. You taught me strength. You taught me that some souls are too loud for fragile hearts. And now, you'll hear my silence in every victory you never expected me to have. You thought you buried me in silence, but you planted a war you can't contain. There's a point when the pain burns so deep it stops screaming. It goes quiet, and in that quiet, something new begins. Stillness is not peace, it's the forge. It's the slow burn where the old version of you melts away and the new one starts to take shape. Sharper, colder, unbreakable. Most people run from silence because it forces them to face what they've been avoiding. But I stayed. I sat in it. I let it consume me until there was nothing left but truth. And truth is merciless. It doesn't comfort you. It cuts. It kills illusions. It strips you bare until you're staring at yourself with no disguise left to hide behind. That's what stillness does. It kills the weak man, so the real one can rise. There were nights I could feel my own pulse echoing in the dark. Each heartbeat like a hammer striking the molten metal of who I was becoming. Every breath was a spark, every memory a flame. And I realized this pain wasn't punishment, it was purification. I wasn't being destroyed, I was being reforged. Every scar, every failure, every moment of humiliation, they were all heat applied to the steel of my soul. And the silence, that was the anvil. That was where I was beaten into form. I learned something sacred in that stillness. Growth doesn't happen in applause. It happens in isolation. Transformation doesn't announce itself. It hums quietly in the dark. While everyone else sleeps, while the world forgets your name. That's where power is born, not in crowds, in corners, not in noise, in silence. Because only in silence can you hear what your soul has been trying to say all along. Every unspoken word I swallowed turned into weight. Every ounce of pain I carried turned into pressure. And that pressure didn't crush me. It crystallized me. There's a moment when you stop asking, why me? And start saying, try me. When you stop chasing peace outside and start creating war within. A war that burns away weakness until strength is all that's left. That's what stillness taught me. The world worships movement, constant noise, constant motion. But real power doesn't move frantically. It waits, it observes, it studies. The lion doesn't roar while stalking. It saves its breath for the kill. And that's what I became. Patient, calculating, silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was studying the battlefield. Stillness became my weapon. Patience became my sword. Discipline became my crown. People will mistake your calm for surrender. They'll think your lack of reaction means you've lost. But they forget. The quietest fire burns the hottest. I didn't stop caring. I stopped wasting energy. I didn't lose emotion. I learned control. And I didn't go silent out of defeat. I went silent to reload. Because power doesn't scream. It breathes. It builds. It waits until the right moment. And then it moves like lightning. I remember sitting in that stillness, feeling everything I used to be burning away. The boy who sought validation, the man who needed to be understood, the soul that once begged to be loved. Gone. In their place stood something different, something precise, something inevitable. And I realized I no longer wanted to return to who I was before the pain, because the pain was the price of awakening. Stillness is the teacher no one asks for, but everyone eventually meets. It doesn't lecture, it doesn't comfort. It just sits with you until you finally see what you've become. You stop fearing the dark because you realize you are the fire inside it. You stop seeking revenge because you see that survival itself is revenge. You stop chasing crowns because you understand. You've already forged one out of scars. And that's when I understood the sacred law of becoming. To rise, you must first rest. To speak thunder, you must first master silence. To wield power, you must first be crushed by it. Because stillness doesn't weaken you, it centers you. It teaches you to respond, not react. To choose words like blades, not arrows. To carry storms in your chest without letting a drop spill. I no longer fear the quiet. I crave it. Because in that space, I'm reminded of what I am. Not noise, not echo, not reflection, but origin. The world will always confuse stillness with emptiness. Let them. Because when I finally move, when I finally speak, when I finally step forward, they'll realize what the silence was hiding all along. I was never gone. I was never broken. I was being built. The silence didn't bury me. It baptized me. And when I rise from it, I won't whisper anymore. I'll roar with the weight of every unspoken word that forged me. I didn't lose my voice. I reforged it in the flames of stillness. For a long time, I said nothing, and the world mistook that silence for defeat. They thought I was gone, buried, broken, erased. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means the storm is thinking. When I finally spoke again, the air shifted. The same words that once trembled on my tongue came back like thunder rolling through a valley of bones. And those who laughed at my silence, they listened now. Because pain changes the frequency of your voice. It deepens it. It gives it weight. You don't speak like before. You speak like a weapon. The world wasn't ready for the sound that came out of me. Because I didn't speak for applause. I didn't speak to be understood. I spoke to declare war on the version of myself that used to beg. They wanted me quiet. Now every breath is a reckoning. Every sentence carries the gravity of every night I stayed awake, bleeding in silence, learning to rebuild myself without anyone's help. My words became hammers, not to destroy others, but to break open the gates that once caged me. When I spoke again, I wasn't trying to prove them wrong. I was proving myself right, because I realized I don't owe explanations to those who never listened. I don't owe peace to those who fed on my chaos. And I don't owe softness to those who mistook my patience for weakness. So I spoke like fire, not to warm the room, but to burn it down and rebuild it in my image. There's a certain power in words born out of wounds. They don't sound polished, they sound real. They come from the gut, from the grave, from the ashes. They don't care about being pretty. They exist to remind the world that the dead still walk. And when those words finally leave your lips, they don't travel. They hit. They echo. They linger. They change the temperature of the room. Because truth spoken after silence carries the weight of 1,000 screams that never made it out. I remember the first time someone looked at me differently. Not with pity, but with fear. That's when I knew it worked. My voice no longer begged to be heard. It commanded. And the funny thing, I didn't even raise it. That's the beauty of rebirth. You don't have to shout anymore. Your presence is the sound. When you've survived being ignored, you carry an aura that demands attention because you're not speaking from theory. You're speaking from fire. Every word I speak now carries a scar. And scars don't lie. They tell stories without needing permission. They bleed truth in every syllable. I learned that the world doesn't respect words. It respects weight. And weight comes from survival. From pain endured. From nights spent crawling through hell and still finding the voice to say, I'm not done yet. So now when I speak, the world trembles. Not because I'm loud, but because every word carries history. They used to talk over me. Now even their silence listens, because my voice no longer belongs to me. It belongs to every version of myself that died trying to be heard. It belongs to the nights I spent whispering into darkness, hoping someone, anyone, would understand. It belongs to the boy who thought quiet meant weak, and to the man who proved him wrong. I don't speak to fill the air anymore. I speak to split it open, to carve my existence into it, to remind every soul who doubted. You cannot bury thunder. You can only delay it. When I finally spoke again, I didn't try to sound strong. I was strong, because strength doesn't come from noise. It comes from knowing you don't need permission to exist. Now when I speak, it's not a cry for help. It's a declaration of war. Every word says, I remember what you did, but I no longer bleed for it. Every pause says, I don't owe you my peace. Every tone says, I found power where you left me broken. And that's what terrifies them. Not the sound of my voice, but the silence that shaped it. I'm not here to be understood. I'm here to be felt. To make sure the ones who buried me feel the tremor of every syllable rising from the ground they thought would hold me. My voice no longer whispers. It carves through air, through fear, through memory. And those who once turned their backs now look over their shoulders when they hear my name. I don't speak for revenge. I speak for remembrance. To remind them and myself that silence was never the end. It was ignition. And now that the storm has found its sound, there's no going back to quiet. Because when thunder learns to speak, the world learns to listen. They silenced me once. Now my words shake the ground beneath their feet. There comes a silence after victory, different from the silence after pain. The first one feels empty. The second one feels earned. I've walked through both. I know the taste of each. And now, I stand in a silence that doesn't hurt anymore. It hums, steady, powerful, alive. It doesn't cage me. It crowns me. This is what they never understood. Silence isn't where I died. It's where I was reborn. I used to think I was chasing peace. Now I know I was chasing purpose. Because peace without purpose is just a prettier kind of prison. What I found in the end was something greater. A balance between war and wisdom. The stillness of a blade right before it strikes. The calm of a storm that knows it no longer needs to prove it can destroy. That's the power I carry now. Not loud, not desperate, just inevitable. Every voice that tried to break me only sharpened mine. Every silence that once suffocated me became sacred. And every betrayal that once haunted me bowed to the empire I built from its ashes. They will tell stories, try to soften the edges, pretend they always believed. But history remembers truth, not comfort. And the truth is simple. I was forged in darkness, raised in fire, crowned in stillness. I've learned that kings don't shout. They speak once, and the world adjusts. Because their voice isn't just sound, it's decree. My decree is this: never underestimate the quiet ones. Because they are not empty, they are loading. They are not lost, they are aligning. And when they rise, they do so with the force of everything they once held back. I don't seek revenge anymore. Revenge ends stories. I'm writing one that never ends. I don't want forgiveness either. Forgiveness belongs to those who still hurt. I outgrew the hurt. Now I breathe power. Because this voice, this soul, this silence that became sound, it's no longer mine alone. It belongs to everyone who ever bit their tongue instead of begging. To everyone who rebuilt quietly while the world mocked their stillness. To every soul who sat in the dark and said, not yet, but soon. So let this be the final word. Let this be the echo that never fades. The silence you cursed me with, I turned it into kingdom. The darkness you buried me in, I turned it into throne room. And the voice you ignored, I turned it into prophecy. Now the silence doesn't haunt me. It serves me. It waits when I wait. It moves when I move. And when I finally speak, it parts the world like a tide. This is not the voice of a victim. This is not the whisper of a broken man. This is the roar of one who remembered who he was when everyone else forgot. So if you ever find yourself alone in the dark, with nothing but the sound of your own breath, don't fear it. Listen. Because that's where it begins. That's where power is born. Silence isn't the end of your story. It's the chamber where your crown is cast. This voice was forged in silence. And now, even the gods lean in to listen.